So the Resident Evil 4 remake just came out today, and I've been playing the hell out of it since it dropped last night at midnight. So far, I've put in about 8 hours into the game. I just finished the village section, and I just wanted to give my initial impressions on how I feel about the game and what I think of it so far. Before we get into it, I do want to warn you that there will be some minor gameplay and story spoilers, but I won't go into too much detail, so I won't spoil everything. First, let's talk about gameplay. Whenever I played the chainsaw demo, I was unsure about the controls. Everything felt a little clunky, and I didn't quite fall in love with it right away. However, now that I've been playing the full game and after getting used to it and messing around with the controls a little bit, it all feels really smooth to play and yet still familiar to the original Resident Evil 4. Things like shooting enemies in the head and going in for melee, or using your knife to cut enemies down on the ground. It all feels really smooth and really good here. Enemies are very aggressive here as well. They will close the distance fast, and if you get surrounded, it can be very overwhelming, in a good way. In the original, it often felt very overwhelming simply because of the clunky controls. Here, however, it's just because the enemies are very hyper aggressive. However, in the remake, you can not only use your knife to attack enemies, but you can use it to deflect attacks. So you have a lot more options here to handle all the crazy odds that are going to be thrown against you. You have to be careful though, because your knives do have a durability to it. You have your starting knife that you begin the game with. You can take that to a merchant and upgrade it, and also whenever it breaks, you can repair it. You can also find different random knives from enemies or in boxes and things like that. At first, it felt a little bit annoying to have durability tied to your knife, but it makes sense in a gameplay perspective, and I didn't mind it so much, considering you can repair it for not too much money at the merchant. It wasn't too bad, and it didn't really hinder the experience in any way for me. RE4 Remake also has a stealth mechanic to it now, which I was both excited for and a little nervous about. After playing with it for a little while, it's actually a very nice mechanic, and I think it lends itself well to RE4. It's not overused, and the game definitely doesn't turn into a stealth game all of a sudden. There are times where stealth can help you out, take a few enemies out before things go crazy, but it's still Resident Evil 4 at its core. You're still going to have a bunch of gunfights with enemies all around you, and it can get very chaotic. It's a very good feature, and I didn't hate it at all. One thing that surprised me most about the remake is how well the gameplay carries over from the original Resident Evil 4. What I mean by that is just small little details, how it feels to shoot an enemy in the head and run up for a melee attack. Or, throw a flashbang on the ganados that have parasites that pop out of their head, and you can one-shot them with a flash grenade. And even things like pulling out your rifle and one-shotting them in the head. It's just crazy how well this game feels not only modern, but very, very familiar to everyone who played the original Resident Evil 4. The remake also follows the same basic structure and path as the original, but it cleverly subverts your expectations in really cool ways as well. One time, for instance, when you first meet Luis, in the original, you would go into a room, you would hear banging in the back room, and you would walk up to a closet and he just pops out. In the remake, it's very similar. You go into this house, you hear banging in the back, but you walk back there and there's a ganado just banging on the floor with a hammer. You kill him and you go downstairs and you find Luis wrapped up in a bag. So it's all very similar to the original, but it changes things in slight different ways, which is really cool. There are a lot of bigger moments like this that happen as well, but I don't want to spoil everything for you. I think you should experience it for yourself. The same things that I said about the gameplay aspect of the remake can also be said for the story as well. Everything's a bit more modernized, however, it feels very familiar to the original. You're still going to be following the same path as in the original, the same story plays out. However, everything's a little bit more modernized and just is told in a more natural way instead of the kind of clunky, weird way that the original kind of told the story. There weren't a lot of negatives for me in the game so far. However, there were a couple. I do want to mention, though, that they didn't hinder my experience for the game very much, but I still want to put it out there and put it on record. Starting with Ashley. So in the original, I didn't really have a problem with her. I know a lot of people did. It felt like babysitting. And here in the remake, I feel like she's actually getting in the way more than she did in the original. Maybe it's just my experience, or I just had a couple bad experiences with her. I'm not sure. But there were quite a few times she just kept getting grabbed, even though I tried to tell her to stick close to me. Things like that. It wasn't a huge deal, and it wasn't really a problem, but it was still a little annoying from time to time. Something else that I don't necessarily is a negative, but I kind of feel indifferent about it so far. I think I have to get further in the game to really like let you know how I feel about it. So far, there's a difference in tone from the original. What I mean by that is in the original Resident Evil 4, it felt very silly and kind of goofy from the beginning. And while the one-liners are definitely here in the remake, everything feels a little bit more serious and a little bit more dramatic, so to speak. It's not a negative. Like, I think it's actually pretty cool, but it is something that I wanted to note here as well. So far, at least up until the end of the village section, this game has exceeded my already high expectations. I'm having a blast with the gameplay, re-experiencing the story, seeing the differences. I can't wait to get further, see what they do with the castle section, see what they do with the island section, which is probably the one I'm most curious about, and also kind of have my doubts about, but we'll see when we get there. However, this was just a first impressions video, so I will be uploading my final verdict on the game once I beat and complete it. So subscribe if you want to see that. Also, let me know in the comments down below, are you guys playing Resident Evil 4 Remake? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Just let's have a discussion down in the comments below. What do you feel about it so far? Like I said, I'm loving it so far, but I'd really love to hear from you guys. So please leave this video a like if you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more Resident Evil 4 Remake content, please subscribe as well. This has been the Gaspless. Have a wonderful day.